Welcome to my channel. Today, let's see how Lego vehicles handle the ultimate test, walking the tightrope. Let's team up with the engineering crew to build the Lego vehicle for today's tightrope challenge. Get ready to see how it's designed to balance and move across the line. Now it's time for the tightrope challenge. Let's see if our Lego creation can keep its balance and make it all the way across. Amazing! It ran across the rope with ease, steady, smooth, and without a single slip. Next, the distance of the rope is 10 centimeters. Oh no! With a gap of 10 centimeters, the car struggled to keep its balance, and it went down! This time it couldn't make it through. Let's upgrade our Lego vehicle and see if it can conquer the challenge this time. Let's begin the challenge. Wow, after the upgrade, it crossed the rope with ease. What an impressive improvement. Next, the rope gap is just 5 centimeters. Oh no, the gap was just too narrow. The Lego car lost its balance and fell. It couldn't complete the challenge. The tech team is back at it. Time to upgrade the Lego car once again. Here we go. The challenge begins. Too tough. The 5 centimeter gap proved to be impossible. It fell off again. Another failure means another upgrade. Let's see what the tech team comes up with this time. Now with better upgrades, can it finally conquer the challenge? Let's find out. Oh no! After all the adjustments and improvements made by the technical team, we had high hopes for the car. But as soon as it got on the ropes, it lost balance and fell straight down. Unfortunately, even with the upgrades, it still couldn't overcome the narrow 5 centimeter gap. A tough challenge indeed! Welcome to my channel. Today, let's find out how our custom Lego vehicles take on the ultimate slime challenge. Let's build our first slime challenger, a Lego car with 4 black wheels. Time to see if it can make it through the gooey mess. And just like that, it cruises through the slime with ease. Nothing seems to slow this one down. Next up, the Lego vehicle with 2 paddle wheels. Let's see how it handles the sticky slime challenge. The slime sticks to the paddles, slowing it down, and it fails to complete the challenge. Our next slime challenger is a Lego car equipped with 4 gear-like wheels. Let's watch and see how it handles the challenge. Amazing! The gear wheels bite through the slime like it's nothing. No hesitation, no slowdown. It clears the challenge with ease. Next up, a unique design, a Lego car with gear wheels mounted on a square frame. Let's find out right now. It struggles at first. The slime really pushes back, but with steady traction and determination, it powers through and finishes strong. Next up, the 2-step walking Lego vehicle. It doesn't roll, it walks. But can those slow, steady steps carry it through the sticky slime? Let's find out. The slime clings tight to every part of the walker. Each step becomes heavier, and finally it gives in. Unfortunately, it couldn't conquer the slime.
Looking at these scenes, I'm sure you've already guessed what today's masterpiece and challenge are, right? That's right, it's a tank with a unique ball-shooting gun design. We'll start with the detailed assembly process of this tank, from attaching the wheel system with the chain tracks, to building the sturdy frame, adding the ammo grooves, and connecting the motors. Each step brings us closer to completing a powerful tank. Let's dive straight into the first challenge. The tank quickly overcomes the obstacle with ease. For the second challenge, the terrain is higher, requiring the tank to put in more effort. On the first attempt, the tank got stuck and couldn't pass. But after retrying, the tank used all its strength and impressively conquered the challenge. Next, the challenge becomes even more difficult with higher obstacles. However, the tank had to give up, and he couldn't make it over. But we're not stopping there. Now we're going to test the tank's ball shooting ability. The first shot is fired and immediately destroys the target with perfect accuracy. The entire process is truly successful. Finally, we come to the fifth challenge, where the tank has to destroy multiple targets consecutively in a single shot. All the obstacles are destroyed, and perfect. So, what do you think of today's product? Feel free to share your thoughts with me.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we will see a Lego car overcome the challenge of carrying a wooden block. Will it succeed or will it struggle? Let's find out. Next up is the build. Let's take a behind-the-scenes look at how we built this Lego car step by step. First, we built a solid wheel system, making sure the axles were properly aligned for smooth movement. The wheels had to be strong and well-balanced to handle both the weight and the terrain. Next, we constructed a strong flat base. This would act as the cargo area where the wooden sticks would be placed. It needed to be wide and stable enough to hold the load without tipping over. After some fine-tuning and adjustments, it was finally ready for the real challenge. Let's see how well it performs when it takes on the wooden load test. And now, it's time for the first challenge. Our Lego transport vehicle will attempt to carry a heavy wooden plank weighing 1,300 grams. That's quite a load for a build made entirely from Lego. It looks like this weight isn't much of a problem at all for our Lego vehicle. It's moving forward smoothly, staying balanced, and showing no signs of strain. Challenge number 1 completed with ease. Alright, moving on to challenge number 2. This time, the Lego transport vehicle will face a much tougher task, carrying a massive wooden plank weighing 4,000 grams. That's over 3 times heavier than the previous load. And once again, it's handling the weight like a champ. Despite the 4,000-gram load, the vehicle stays completely stable. Challenge number 2, completed effortlessly. On to challenge number 3, this time with a heavy 6,500-gram wooden load. But once again, the Lego vehicle keeps its cool. No shaking, no slowing down. It rolls to the finish line just as smoothly as before. Another easy win. Challenge number 4, 9,000-gram load. With this heavy load, the wheels started to struggle a bit, but that didn't stop the Lego vehicle. It kept going and still finished the challenge successfully. Challenge number 5, a massive 12,000-gram load. With this massive load, the vehicle is clearly struggling. Oh no, it looks like one of the axles has snapped and the wheels are starting to deform. But somehow, with sheer determination, it keeps going. Against all odds, it powers through and crosses the finish line in dramatic fashion. Challenge number 6, a crushing 15,500 gram load. It keeps going, but oh no! Just before the finish line, the wooden load collapses. Our tech team has stepped in to replace the damaged axle and wheels. Now the vehicle is back on its wheel, and let's see if it can continue the challenge. Alright, the vehicle is back in action. Let's return to the 15,500 gram challenge and see if it can finish what it started. Here we go. Amazing! This time it powers through the 15,500 gram load with no trouble. Smooth, steady, and unstoppable. What a comeback! Challenge, a staggering 17,000 gram load. The wheels show slight deformation under the massive weight, but it doesn't stop the vehicle. It rolls through the final challenge with surprising ease. Let's continue with the 20,000 gram challenge. A Lego-built vehicle carrying a 20 kilogram load? That's seriously impressive. Who would have thought tiny bricks could handle such a massive task? Truly a remarkable feat. Oh no! Well, what's happening? The vehicle is slowing down and it's tipping over. Looks like the 20 kilogram load was just too much this time. This load was just too much. The vehicle couldn't handle the weight and it failed the challenge. Welcome to my channel. Today, let's see if our Lego-built vehicles can take on the ultimate water challenge. Next up, the water challenge with our red-wheeled Lego vehicle. Let's see how it handles this one. Starting with the red-wheeled Lego vehicle, let's see how many seconds it takes to reach the finish line underwater. And there it is. The red-wheeled Lego vehicle finishes in 8.21 seconds. Next up, the black-wheeled Lego vehicle. Let's see how it performs in the water challenge. Wow, just 4.21 seconds. Now it's the gear-wheeled Lego vehicle's turn. Oh, 11.26 seconds. Up next, the yellow-wheeled Lego vehicle. Let's see how it handles the underwater track. And it crosses the finish line at 7.53 seconds. Now it's time for the paddle wheel Lego vehicle. It looks like movement is a real struggle for the paddle wheel vehicle. And finally, it reaches the finish line in 24.14 seconds. And here's the final leaderboard. The black-wheeled Lego car takes the crown this round. What a performance. Next up, challenge 2. This time, our Lego vehicles will face rocky terrain. First to face the rocks, the paddle wheel vehicle. Oh, surprisingly, the rocky terrain doesn't seem to be a big problem for the paddle wheel vehicle. It powers through and reaches the finish line. Next up, the red-wheeled vehicle. But this rocky terrain proves to be too much. It struggles hard and fails to complete the challenge. Now it's the black-wheeled vehicle's turn. Wow, no trouble at all. It handles the rocks with ease and cruises to the finish. Up next, the gear-wheeled Lego vehicle. It looks like those gear wheels were made for this. No signs of struggle. It powers through the rocks and finishes flawlessly. And now the yellow-wheeled Lego vehicle takes on the rocks. Wow, flawless performance. The yellow-wheeled vehicle makes it to the finish line without breaking a sweat. Now it's time for challenge 3, climbing over even higher rock obstacles. Opening in challenge 3, the yellow-wheeled Lego car. Oh, this one's tough. Unfortunately, it doesn't make it to the finish. Next up, the gear-wheeled Lego vehicle. Gear wheels on the rocks, but no luck. It couldn't make it over the steep peaks. Paddle wheel is up next, and it's struggling hard. Despite all efforts, the wheeled vehicle could not get through. Despite all its effort, the red-wheeled vehicle just can't make it. Another one falls short in this tough challenge. Black wheel's up next, and wow, no problem at all. It climbs with ease and clears the challenge like a champ. Moving on to the next challenge, the steep incline climb. Let's see which Lego vehicle has the grip and power to go uphill without slipping back. First up, the red-wheeled vehicle. It gives it a go, but just can't make the climb. Now it's the black-wheeled vehicle. Surprisingly, it struggles here and fails to reach the top. Gear-wheeled vehicle takes its shot. But no luck! It slips and fails the climb. Paddle wheel vehicle on the slope. It pushes forward, but the incline is just too much. Another failed attempt. The yellow wheeled vehicle. Trying again and again.
think I can take this anymore. I might just break all the way heartache, 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 all the way break all the way.